Thank you everyone for coming. So, as you all know, today is the 105th birth anniversary of Richard Feynman. So, today we have with us Dr. Ashish Arora, an experimental physicist in IISER Pune, who will be giving the talk on the life and works of Richard Feynman. So, before starting, I'd like to answer a question that Sir asked me right now before, that he is an experimental physicist, but Richard Feynman was a theoretician. So, why did I call him? So, to be honest, like I don't have very concrete answer to that. But what I know is that what I feel that Richard Feynman was a very good science communicator, and Sir Dr. Ashish Arora is also the same on the same lines. So that I feel is a very good connection, and the whole of physics. He was also a physicist, and Sir is also a physicist. So that is the main thing that I feel, that physics as a whole is what connects us, and science is the bigger thing. So with that, I would like to call upon Sir, please.
Okay, thank you very much for this very embarrassing introduction to compare me with the giants of Richard Feynman in science communication, although I'm not even a bit of that. Although I'm very inspired from Richard, that's why I also try my bit to combine my research with some science popularization, which Richard was also known for. So thanks to the Science Club for inviting me to give this lecture. Although this is supposed to be a formal sort of lecture, but let's also try to keep it a bit more interactive than it's supposed to be. It's going to be a rather biography and some snippets of Richard Feynman's life, which has inspired many of us when we are undergraduates, and also when we are graduates, and also when we are assistant professors, and also when we are professors, and also when we die. So Feynman's life's aspects have inspired every bit and pieces of everyone's life who has done some physics or maybe even science. Okay, so the title is The Fabulous Feynman, and we'll try to know how he is fabulous. Okay, so first I'll tell you what Richard is known for, and then we'll continue on investigating more and more into his life, on the biographical of his life. Okay, so he was a brilliant theoretical physicist, as we know. His work on path integral formulation of quantum mechanics is what emerged from his PhD thesis. Very well-known work, laid the foundations of path integral approach. His theory on quantum electrodynamics, or his approach on quantum electrodynamics, is very, very different than many others. 3 people shared the Nobel Prize for this. Richard Feynman was one of them. Other was Julian Schwinger and Shinichiro Tomonaga. People said that Feynman's approach was very intuitive. So that is being used by many theoreticians and even people outside physics many times. His Feynman diagrams became very popular. The other approaches by Julian and Shinichiro were quite mathematical. So that was the difference. His approach was a visual one. He investigated physics of superfluidity in supercooled liquid helium. His work in particle physics, where he proposed Parton model, also became well known, where later on Gell-Mann introduced quarks, and there were some similarities in these models. Physics World, a very popular magazine of physics, in 1999 conducted a poll where Richard Feynman was one of the 10 greatest physicists of all time. He ranked 7th. The others were Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, James Clerk Maxwell, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Galileo Galilei. 7th was Feynman, Paul Dirac, Erwin Schrödinger, Ernest Rutherford. Of course, we have known all of them. Can you count how many of these are experimentalists? Just curious. Three? Yeah. I think 3 of them are. Galileo we can count as both theoretician and experimentalist. and Ernest Rutherford. Okay, 2 of them, not even 3. So the theoreticians have been catching the eye of the public in general. That's why my question was like, I am an experimentalist, and I asked them, why did you invite me? Because to give a complete justice to a giant like Feynman, one needs at least some theoretical background. I have some theoretical background, but only some, only a little bit, not much. Okay, let's take a look at his Google Scholar page, which is still maintained by, I think, Caltech. And let's see how big this guy was. Okay, let's take a look at his papers and the citations. Quantum mechanics and path integration. Of course, this is a book based on his thesis, I think. 32,000 times cited. These are some very large citations. If you know science, then you know that these are huge. Mainly mechanics, radiation, heat. Feynman lectures on physics, we know about this. Feynman lectures on physics, okay, these are repeated. Simulating physics with computers. Now think about it. It was just a lecture where he introduced the concept of quantum computation for the first time, I think in 1986, and it turned into a research paper. How many of us know some people whose lectures directly got published as research papers? I mean, word to word, right? Space-time approach to non-relativistic quantum mechanics, forces in molecules. This is when he was just a undergrad. Look at the citations, 5,000. Very fundamental contribution. There is a plenty of room at the bottom. Again, a lecture where he introduced the field of nanotechnology. It was just published as a research paper, just a lecture. Character of physical law, again a lecture. Very high energy collisions of hadrons and so on. So this is a paper. Anyway, so there are many, many works which were directly published when he gave lectures. Look at his citation record. This is after he died and it's still rising. So this is amazing. Okay, he was an excellent educator and a science popularizer. 3 volumes of for undergraduate students called the Feynman Lectures of Physics have encouraged us all to learn physics better and better. Many people say that these could not become the textbooks, the normal textbooks of undergrad level at the universities, but still they make you think into physics. When I was young, I found a DVD of Feynman Lectures on Physics, where it was actual real Feynman. I couldn't believe that I have found that. I found it through some friend. And I used to hear all these lectures with the book open in front of me. So this is why I was hugely inspired by Feynman, and this is why I also took this challenge of introducing Feynman today, even being an experimentalist, because I was always in awe with Feynman. Then there are autobiographical books which have been very inspiring for public at large, called Surely You Are Joking, Mr. Feynman, and What Do You Care What Other People Think? How many of you have read any of these books? Okay, so this audience already has many people. Then many lectures of science which he gave on popular level across the world got converted to books or even research publications. We saw some examples. QED, The Strange Theory of Light and Matter. 4 lectures which he gave in I think Auckland somewhere, which got converted to this book. I also went through this book, a very interesting book. It's a thin one, a very nice one. The Character of Physical Law, 6 easy pieces, the meaning of it all, the Feynman Lectures on Gravitation, Feynman Lectures on Computation, Pleasure of Finding Things Out. So he used to speak in a textbook language, that's clear, that's why all of these are textbooks. And there are many more, 6 easy pieces, 6 not so easy pieces, and books like that. Okay, how many of you have read like at least 2 of these books? So I can notice some Feynman fans around. Other things he is known for. He had a huge role to play in the development of first atomic bomb during the Manhattan Project. This is that bomb. He introduced the concept of nanotechnology from there's plenty of room at the bottom, in 1959. He introduced the concept of quantum computation, about which the whole world is gaga at the moment. And he was an established bongo player, right? So let's listen to some bongo. Okay, I hope it works. And it does not work. And then my only chance is to play it when I'm out of presentation mode. And I promise you, I have not fast forwarded it. Okay. Okay, and very popularly he found the solution to the Challenger disaster, the space shuttle Challenger of NASA, which went into pieces after 73 seconds of its flight and took the lives of all the 7 crew members aboard. Okay, so let's start with some brief biography of Professor Feynman. He was born on 11th May 1918 in New York City to Lucille and Melville Feynman. She was a homemaker and he was a sales manager. He did not speak until after his 3rd birthday. I think he shares this with Einstein as well. He did not speak until very late. He was heavily influenced from his father, who encouraged him to question everything, challenge orthodox thinking, and think about everything in details. He told that, okay, learning names about things does not matter. You have to learn how these things work, right? He popularly gives an example of a bird, like his father used to tell him. Like, someone has learned the name of a bird in many different languages and is trying to show it off that, yeah, I know the name of the bird in many different languages. It does not impress me enough, because you have to learn far more than a name about how the bird behaves, why it's found in this species, how it evolved, and why this beak is like this, and so on. So this is the scientific way of thinking things, which he tried to convey to the students. He tells that he got his sense of humor from his mother. Quite humorous guy, if you have heard any of his videos or lectures. He had strong inclination towards engineering and theoretical physics as a kid. At the age of 10, he built a laboratory at home where he hires his sister Juan, I don't know how to pronounce this name, Juan, for 4 cents per week to amuse his friends. Now, the job which Juan got was the following. There were many instruments which Feynman had built at home, and one of these instruments, for example, had a spark which was propagating between two spheres when he was applying large voltages. And Juan's job was to put a finger there to amuse the friends, that it causes shock. And she was getting 4 cents for this. This is what she told in her interview later on. She herself becomes an astrophysicist and a geophysicist later on. He repaired radios as a hobby when he was a kid and gets hired by people around in the neighborhood for fixing their radios. He used to climb on the roof and fixing antennas, or he was converting their DC sets into an AC set that it directly goes with the AC supply, and so on. So he showed early signs of a theoretical physicist because he was thinking all these problems in a very theoretical way in the beginning and tried to come to a solution. Then once his parents were away, he was scared, so he created a burglar alarm system. Okay. So he had shown early signs of a theoretical as well as an experimental physicist, or an engineer as he calls it. So he attended some high school in New York City and quickly gets promoted to higher math class. I could not find how many steps he got promoted, but he went to the higher math class immediately. When an IQ test was conducted, in which he does not believe really, later on he told. At high school, his estimated IQ was 125. The author, James Clerk, who wrote a book, a biographical book called Genius, The Life and Science of Richard Feynman, he told that this IQ was high but merely respectable. In fact, his sister, Joan, scored 1 point higher and later jokingly told an interview that she was smarter. So Richard declined to join Mensa International, which is a very old high IQ society, later on citing that his IQ was too low. At 15, he teaches himself advanced maths, such as advanced algebra, differential and integral calculus, and so on, and invents his own notations and his own ways to solve heavy integrals, half derivatives, logarithms, and many other functions. He invents the new notation to avoid confusions as well. So he wins New York University Math Championship in his last year in high school, not surprisingly. Okay, he attends MIT, where he does majors in mathematics, but he doesn't like it. He switches to electrical engineering since he considers mathematics to be too abstract. And many of us physicists still, go into this mode of considering mathematics as too abstract without, at the risk of annoying mathematicians. But then he notices that he had gone too far when he chooses electrical engineering. So he switches to physics, which was somewhere in between. So he says, okay, this is balanced for me, which has both math and other things, theory. So as an undergraduate, he publishes 2 papers in Physical Review. It should be actually Physical Review, the most well-known physics science magazine or journal at that time. As an undergraduate, how many of us have done that? The first paper is the scattering of cosmic rays by the stars of a galaxy, and the other is forces in molecules, which we just saw, which is heavily cited. Today, its main result is known as Hellman-Feynman theorem. So there is a theorem on his name already as an undergrad. In 1939, he receives a bachelor's degree, and he qualifies graduate school, which is a PhD school, entrance exam to Princeton University with a perfect score in physics and outstanding score in mathematics. Again, not surprising. Now, this is where he differs. He has a distinction from Einstein, because Albert Einstein never, used to get great marks, but Richard was getting full marks. He was a very hard-working student, very methodological. Now, there was a controversy when he got selected to PhD, because the physics department had Henry D. Smith wrote to Philip D. Morse, who was in charge, "Is Feynman Jewish? We have no definite rule against Jews, but have to keep their proportion in our department reasonably small because of the difficulty in placing them." They believed that the Jews cannot be placed for jobs later on. But then Morse replies, "Feynman's physiognomy and manner, however, show no trace of this characteristic." Okay. So he does PhD in theoretical physics under the supervision of John Wheeler from 1939 to 42, 3 years. 1941, he gave his first seminar to an international audience on classical version of Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory. Now, this was not a quantum theory, this was a classical version of some theory, which was attended by Albert Einstein, Wolfgang Pauli, John von Neumann, and so on. Einstein comments that one might try to apply this method to gravity in general relativity. Fred Hoyle and Jayant Narlikar, Jayant Narlikar, of course, did this later as Hoyle-Narlikar theory of gravity. So far-reaching implications of whatever he was producing. He received his PhD in 1942 on the principle of least action in quantum mechanics, and we know how far this went in introducing path integral approach. Okay, James Clerk, again, the author of this biographical book, he writes, "This was Richard Feynman nearing the crest of his powers. At 23, there may now have been no physicist on earth who could match his exuberant command over the native materials of theoretical science. It was not just a facility at mathematics, though it had become clear that the mathematical machinery emerging in the Wheeler-Feynman collaboration was beyond Wheeler's own ability. Feynman seemed to possess a frightening ease with the substance behind the equations, like Einstein at the same age, like the Soviet physicist Lev Landau, but few others." So he's already comparing at the age of 23 to these giants. Okay, Feynman was not allowed to marry until he finished his PhD, because this was written in his contract, because marriage was considered as a distraction for the graduates at that time in Princeton University. However, he gets married to his high school love, Arlene Greenbaum, in 1942 after Feynman got a PhD. Okay. Arlene had tuberculosis and would not have lived too long. It was well known to Feynman by now, but he decided to get married to her because he had promised and he wanted to stand up to the love. In those days, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941 and the World War was up, we know. America had nothing to do. The US had nothing to do with the world war before that. He was playing neutral. But then as Japan attacked there, the US was dragged into the war. US is like, yeah, now we are full blown up to everyone who is against us, including Nazis and so on. Now the problem is, Germany was known as the hub of theoretical sciences until then. Many theoretical physicists had already left Germany because Jews were not allowed anymore in Germany at that time. Albert Einstein, Max Born, they had left Germany. But some of them remained, like Werner Heisenberg, who was given the responsibility to build the atomic bomb. Werner Heisenberg, this is controversial. He claims that he never consciously did his best to do this, but he was always under fear from Nazis, that he had always to prove that he was working on the atomic bomb. But he never did that actually. That's what the history says. That's what the history suggests. Although Niels Bohr was very annoyed with Werner Heisenberg all the time because he had a strong belief that Werner Heisenberg was up to the atomic weapons. Anyway, so Americans are now worried that if Germans get this atomic weapon before us, then we are doomed. Then we lose the war. So they say, okay, let's build our own atomic weapon. So they bring scientists together. Robert Oppenheimer, we know. A movie is coming on Robert Oppenheimer, right? Also, Feynman is there in that movie, so you must watch. He was establishing Los Alamos Laboratory, which was a secret mission for creating atomic bombs, and the mission was called the Manhattan Project. So then Feynman got hired and traveled in 1943, and he was assigned to Hans Bethe's theoretical division. His wife was staying in some other place called Albuquerque in New Mexico only, which was not too far, but she was not allowed, of course, on this secret mission. And so she was in a hospital there. She did not have much time. Actually, tuberculosis was known to be a disease which would kill you at that time. 2 years at max, that's what you have. So Feynman knew that when he is building this bomb, he might lose his wife forever, but he was up to the task. Okay, yeah, this is the eye card of Richard Feynman during the Manhattan Project. This is how he looked. Okay, so he immediately was made a group leader by Hans Bethe, who was very impressed with his abilities to do physics and to think straight and to think in an unbiased, very rational way. And in fact, with Bethe, he already developed a Bethe-Feynman formula for calculating the yield of fission bomb. Okay. Hans Bethe is very well known for his contributions to nuclear physics, and Feynman was also involved. So Feynman administered a computational group of human computers, because those days the computers were based on something called punch cards, and all the computations had to be done manually. So there was a set of people who are putting these punch cards one by one in a machine and getting punched, and then you are getting the answer one by one. And if you have a very long computation, this is going to take many months to finish one computation. So for example, there were 3 problems which they had to solve initially, and initially they counted that they will need 9 months. But Feynman developed a method of parallel computation by putting lots of people at task, by giving some part of the problem to everyone and then combining the main result finally to get to a solution. And he increases the efficiency by 10 folds. So 9 problems in 3 months, that's what it came to. Okay. So this is where Feynman actually started contributing to the parallel computation, to which he kept on contributing until his death. The supercomputers that were built earlier had Feynman's contribution in them, we will see. Okay, he devises safety protocols as well for handling enriched uranium. This was also his task. During that, he was bored sometimes, and he amuses himself by investigating the combination locks on the cabinets and desks of the physicists, where he is picking up the locks, because sometimes he knows that this physicist is so dumb that he would not have changed the default lock, default number sequence, which would be 0000, and he would open that and steals the documents and put something there into pranking them, thinking that, okay, you are hacked by a Russian spy who has got all your secrets. So he was, And also, there were other stories, like he would know that this physicist likes the number E, the irrational number E, right? So he would guess the 2.71271 and whatever the other digits are, 6 digits, and then he would try them and the lock would open, right? Okay, so this is what he was doing. So Arlene unfortunately died in 1945, just 1 month before, I think, before the test of the nuclear bomb happened. He travels to her hospital and then comes back quite heartbroken, but then immediately immerses himself into the task, because this is what he is going to keep him busy and keep him distracted from his loss. Okay. Atomic bombs were then dropped over Hiroshima and Nagasaki on 6th and 9th of August respectively, 1945, killing about 200,000 people. So this terminates the war, Nazis lose, Allied powers won, but this makes Feynman very sad afterwards. He was quite young. He did not realize initially what they have created, but afterwards when he realized it, he was very sad. So Arlene's loss and then this, which made him sad. Okay. Now in August 1944, which was a year before, he got recommendation from Hans Bethe. Feynman receives an offer from the Cornell University in New York, and he accepts and moves there in October 1945, just after the bomb was done. He moves there, but his father suddenly died a year later. Immediately Feynman undergoes depression. So many things happening all together. He undergoes depression. He is unable to focus on research, but now he says that, okay, to distract myself, I will just pick some problems which just amuse me and I will solve them for the fun of it. No research, nothing, only fun. And he says that while sitting in a cafeteria, someone was, making a jump with a plate. And then there was a sign of Cornell University which was rotating, and the plate was wobbling. So he started to solve the equation of motion of this plate to find the relationship between this rotation and the wobble. And he finds that later on, all these calculations actually became the basis of his Nobel Prize winning work, where all these things are related with the gyromagnetic ratios of electrons, which he solved using QED and so on. Right? So he was getting a lot out of all of his fun which he was doing. So this is where he develops quantum electrodynamics. Actually in 1940s, the quantum theory of electrodynamics was in turmoil and suffered from infinite integrals in perturbation theory, and there was no solution which was found to this problem. Feynman invents a new method consisting of these diagrams, these funny looking cartoons which we call now as Feynman diagrams, for calculating complicated integrals in a simple and visual way. These diagrams immediately become a hit after certain resistance from the scientific community, and now everyone uses them. He in fact painted his car with these diagrams, with his van with this diagram. Do you remember this scene from the Big Bang Theory? Right? Somewhere in popular culture as well. Okay, he publishes his ideas on his theory on quantum electrodynamics in a series of papers over 3 years. Two other physicists, Julian Schwinger and Shinichiro Tomonaga, also published their versions of QED, but they were highly mathematical. Schwinger said that Feynman diagram were pedagogy and not physics. It's only for education, not physics. But that was not true. It was a very serious work. Initial papers cited Schwinger, but Feynman diagrams soon became extremely prevalent and later on used in many areas of physics and beyond. Okay. Then he moves for a year in Brazil on a sabbatical. And there is a story that he had a girlfriend at that time who suggested to him, who pursued with him to move to Brazil, to move to South America, suggesting that Soviets have a bomb and now the nuclear war will start. So he goes there, stays in Brazil, and there he is impressed with samba music, and he plays this instrument which is actually played on a pan, a frying pan, frigideira. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce it again. Brazilians would be pronouncing it differently. Yeah, please do not show this recording to Brazilians. Okay, then he moves to California Institute of Technology in 1952. In fact, here he was lured by the same guy who had brought him to Cornell. This guy was Robert Bacher. He was a senior physicist, and now he took him to Caltech. In Caltech, he stayed forever later on. He gets married to his girlfriend, Mary Louise Bell, on 28th June 1952, to whom he had met in Cornell. But they frequently quarreled and got divorced soon, in 6 years. Then he meets his next wife, Gwyneth Howard, in Switzerland on the beach at Lake Geneva, gets married on September 24, 1960. Okay, 3 marriages. From the third marriage, okay, this lasted longer. He had a son in 1962 called Carl, and he adopted a daughter, Michelle, in 1968. You can check some interviews of Carl and Michelle also on YouTube. They are available. Okay, now a very interesting episode. While he was at Caltech, FBI started to investigate the time which was spent during the making of the bomb, where they suspected that someone was leaking the secrets of the bomb to the Soviets. Someone was a spy, someone was a communist sympathizer. So they started to check. They started interviewing people. So they had a suspicion on Feynman's friend, Klaus Fuchs. He was actually Manhattan Project's summary physicist. So he was summarizing everything and he knew all details. So he used to lend his car to visit his wife during Manhattan Project, Arlene, who was in Albuquerque. So Feynman used to travel on the weekends. Now, Fuchs was questioned by FBI on suspicions of being a spy, and he names Feynman's safe-cracking and frequent trips to Albuquerque as a matter where he said that this is suspicious. You should check this guy. An unknown woman, possibly his ex-wife Bell, with whom he was divorced, Feynman's wife Bell, when questioned by the FBI on Feynman, called him very strongly pro-communist, extremely complex and dangerous, immensely clever, indeed a genius, but completely ruthless, unhampered by morals, ethics or religion. So that's what this divorce brought him. He was indeed immediately came under radar of FBI, who created a huge file on Feynman. They opened a very giant file and questioned many others such as Bethe and so on. Bethe was in fact questioned for very long. Oppenheimer was questioned for very long in this regard. But Klaus Fuchs was found to be the Soviet spy in reality later on. The FBI report says Professor Feynman was an accomplished jazz drummer and believed that his hobby in the eyes of some individuals was not in keeping with Feynman's role as professor of physics. This is what FBI believed. Yeah, so these FBI files were recently released. They were made public. So you can go and check. Okay. He investigated lots of physical systems at Caltech. There was an unsolved problem for the physics of superfluidity of liquid helium. Why does liquid helium become superfluid at the something called lambda point of 2.1 Kelvin? It flows without any resistance. Now, there were many theories. They produced some parts of the experiment correctly, but not all of them. So Feynman, and those theories were very complicated. So Feynman, he went to the basics, he thought about the boundary conditions of this problem, came up with a Hamiltonian which solved everything which was known experimentally until then. With Murray Gell-Mann, he developed a Gell-Mann, right? Gell-Mann or Gell-Mann? Gell-Mann. He developed a seminal model of weak decay, but he didn't get along too well for very long with Gell-Mann. He is Murray Gell-Mann. So let's listen from Murray Gell-Mann about Feynman, what he wants to say.
But anyway, we did work together for a few years, and it was very pleasant. It was very exciting. We would bounce ideas off each other and call each other at odd times of day and night, and try things and then find they didn't work, and then try other things and find they did work, and so on. It was quite fun. But after a while, his preoccupation with himself and his own image began to get on my nerves. I mean, he was a very good scientist, but he spent a great deal of his effort on generating anecdotes about himself. And whenever we did anything together, he would think of it as his work. It's not that he didn't appreciate me. He actually admired me a great deal. But somehow he just couldn't keep his own ego out of everything, out of anything actually. And finally it got on my nerves, and then I just couldn't work with him anymore. Yeah, well, he spent so much effort generating stories about himself. It was unbelievable. And he insisted on being different, always. His father had taught him that. His father, who died when he was fairly young, taught him always to be different. Well, frequently, in many cases, doesn't pay to be different. Doing the regular thing is okay.
Okay. So this was the famous physicist Murray Gell-Mann on Feynman. So Feynman turned to quantum gravity. He produced some computational devices which are invaluable in explaining the quantum particle behavior of many other theories, quantum chromodynamics, electroweak theory. So these have Feynman diagrams, and all his devices have become bread and butter for many, many theoreticians. Uncounted number of people have gotten their jobs due to Richard Feynman. He receives Nobel Prize in Physics in 1965 for fundamental work on quantum electrodynamics with deep-lying consequences for the physics of elementary particles. This is a picture where he is receiving the Nobel Prize. According to Gribbin and Gribbin, who were the authors of this biographical book, Richard Feynman, A Life in Science, they say nobody else has made such influential contribution to the investigation of all four of the interactions. He was everywhere. Now, we know Feynman as a teacher, being undergraduates, and he was an excellent teacher, one of the best ever known, according to some. At Caltech, when he joins there, he takes up a request from the authorities or from the other professors at Caltech to spruce up the teaching of undergraduates at Caltech. Now, this is a challenging thing. You are a researcher to whom the main task is to produce theories which are state of the art at that time. You have immersed yourself in that task of competing with everyone else in the world who are always at a cutthroat competition with you, but you are also spending lots of time teaching. I don't know, only Feynman could do that. In fact, he was seen many times by some as giving lectures to empty rooms, empty classrooms in the middle of the night, because he thought that, okay, this is the time when no one notices, but I can practice. There is a story which I heard from one of the faculty members, Sudarshan Anant from our department. He tells that there was some guy, maybe a postdoc, who notices once Feynman is giving a lecture in the empty classroom on the physics of fluids, if I remember this story correctly. Okay, the stories, when they pass over and over to others, they get diluted. But take the crux of the story. So then the next morning when he has to give a lecture, he asks the audience, okay, I'm not prepared, let's see, what do you want me to speak on? And someone starts to say gravity, some other one starts to say mechanics. He says, yeah, we can do that. And then there was one who says, Professor Feynman, we would like to hear from you about mechanics of fluids. He says, aha, this is a nice topic, let's do that. And he gives an absolutely wonderful lecture. Probably this guy was planted by him. He always used to play such jokes. So after 3 years of this, he produces 3 volumes on Feynman Lectures of Physics, the well-known books. He suggests to publishers to have a cover picture of a drum with mathematical diagrams about vibrations drawn on those drums, resonances and so on. They instead misunderstand and put a picture of Feynman playing drums. So this is why there is a picture of Feynman playing drums as a cover picture of his lectures. He opposed rote learning or unthinking memorization, as he used to say. Students could be made to think like scientists, be open-minded, curious, and especially to doubt everything. That's what he said. Then Hans Bethe once told that it could be perilous approaching him unprepared, as he did not forget fools and pretenders. So it is dangerous if you are not prepared and you go to Richard to discuss something. He would immediately know that you are not prepared, and he won't forget that. He served as a doctoral advisor to 30 students. Okay, so the Feynman lectures audios are freely available on feynmanlectures.caltech.edu. You can check that. Just Google Feynman lecture audios. Let's check a clip of Feynman telling something about theory and experiment, which is one of my most favorite one. I'm sure many of you have already seen this. Okay, I have to get out of this mode again and play this.
Situation. Now I'm going to discuss how we would look for a new law. In general, we look for a new law by the following process. First, we guess it. Then we well, don't laugh, that's really true. Then we compute the consequences of the guess to see what, if this is right, if this law that we guessed is right, we see what it would imply, and then we compare those computation results to nature, or we say compare to experiment or experience, compare it directly with observation to see if it works. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is, it doesn't make a difference how smart you are, who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
So science is that simple. That's what Richard Feynman said on the scientific method. Okay, 1980s, he joins a company called Thinking Machines Corporation, uninvited. So he knew that he won't be refused. So there was a company established by these three people, and he wanted to contribute to the parallel computation to build supercomputers. So he shows up one day, according to one of these gentlemen, on the door, and he says, "Richard Feynman at your help. Tell me what to do," with a salute, something like that. And then these guys started thinking, oh, this is Richard Feynman. We have to think of something to give him which suits Professor Feynman. So they say, maybe our work can be used to solve some problems of quantum chromodynamics and something. He says, that's not what I'm here for. That's so boring. Give me something which I really can do here. And then they say, well, we are still looking for buying some stationery, some pencils and papers. He says, okay, I'll buy them immediately. This was his first task. But he went on to contribute a lot towards company. He used all these methods which he had developed during 1940s, during the atomic bomb era, to create these parallel computers and so on. Okay. Feynman began thinking of writing an autobiography in 1960s. He was in love with himself. You know it very well. Murray Gell-Mann also tells us how much he spent in creating anecdotes about himself. So he recorded chapters on audio tapes in 1980s, which Ralph Leighton transcribed. Ralph Leighton was also one of those who wrote actually Richard Feynman's those 3 volumes, Feynman Lectures of Physics. He was one of those. So this book was published, which was called Surely a Joking Mr. Feynman, in 1985 and became a bestseller. Now, according to the publishers, they thought that they were insisted to publish this book in January, but who in January was going to buy this book, because this was a time when people usually the sale of the books was very low. But then it was an immediate bestseller. All kinds of people from among science or non-science students or common public alike appreciated this. Maybe you can also go through this book if you have not read. So it's a source of inspiration to many. I also read this when I was a bachelor student. Quite exciting. This book has also been criticized for Feynman's dark side, where he describes how he learned to seduce women at a bar he went to in summer of 1946 and so on. So there were many dark sides to Feynman. All of us have some dark sides. Gell-Mann was upset by Feynman's account of weak interaction work in this book, and he threatened to sue Feynman, because Feynman of course would be like, okay, I did this, I did that, and so on. So some corrections were inserted in the later editions. Now, in 1986, Feynman was quite old, quite weak, because of cancer which he had developed starting 1978. We'll come to that. And NASA was sending a space shuttle, Challenger, which exploded after 74 seconds or 73 seconds into the flight. And NASA is a highly bureaucratic organization. So if you want some answers to any questions, you will not get any straight answers. Feynman was inducted into the task of investigating this by the state, to which he reluctantly agreed. He had made a point of not going to Washington ever, because this was supposed to be in Washington, but then he did because some of his friends persuaded him. They asked him, do you think that this problem is worth solving? He says yes. Do you think if this problem will make any difference to the world? He says, yeah, maybe. And then no question was asked, and he says, oh, to hell with you. And then he moves. So this is how he was convinced. He clashed several times with the commission chairman, William P. Rogers, who was US Attorney General. Now these are highly bureaucratic people. They would always try to tell you one single thing in many, many long sentences, which Feynman is not very appreciating too. In fact, Rogers tells commission's member Neil Armstrong, Feynman is becoming a pain in the beep. So that was the problem. But Feynman followed his methods with the help of some other people in NASA. And on a televised hearing, he plays an important role in explaining the role of temperature in ill functioning of the O-rings, which were holding some fuel tanks together, leading to a leakage of fuel, and investigation was concluded. What he said was that the O-rings, which were holding this thing together, holding the fuels together, they were so cold in that morning of the launch that they were not holding them very well. And he shows this, he demonstrates this to the live public by, he had this rubber of the O-ring and he dips it in some cold thing, maybe ice water, yeah, it was ice water, and he says that look, it has become solid. So this thing has something to do, probably. Okay. He warned in the appendix of the report, which was included only after he threatened not to sign the report, that for a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature can't be fooled. You can't fool nature. Okay. Feynman's views on religion are not very well known, somewhat known. His parents were born from Jewish families, were not very religious. By his youth, Feynman described himself as an avowed atheist. I think this is quite obvious to many of us. Many years later, in a letter to Tina Leviton, declining a request for information for her book on Jewish Nobel Prize winners, which he must have hated a lot, he stated to select for approbation the peculiar elements that come from some supposedly Jewish heredities to open the door to all kinds of nonsense on racial theory. Adding, at 13 I was not only converted to other religious views, but I also stopped believing that the Jewish people are in any way the chosen people. He was that bold. To quote, okay, I have also picked some quotes randomly from the internet. The original source is unknown. Somewhere it's written. Okay, original source of course is Feynman, but not of these pictures, that's unknown. Religion is a culture of faith, science is a culture of doubt, right? We as science students, we know this. It doesn't seem to me that this fantastically marvelous universe, this tremendous range of time and space and different kinds of animals and all the different planets and all these atoms with all their motions and so on, all this complicated thing can merely be a stage so that God can watch human beings struggle for good and evil, which is the view that religion has. The stage is too big for the drama, right? Quite encouraging to think rationally. Okay, in the final years, in 1968, as we talked, Feynman was diagnosed with liposarcoma. It was a rare form of cancer. Surgeons removed a very large tumor which had crushed his one kidney and his spleen. Quite sad. He was only about 60. Yeah, 60 at that time. He was born in 1918. So tumor returned in 1986. It was very painful. All the chemotherapy, he was operated again. And then there was a rupture which caused kidney failure in February 1988. But he declined to undergo all that painful process of dialysis again. To prolong his life by a few more months, he declined that. He died on February 15, 1988. With his last words, I would hate to die twice, it's so boring. Close to his death, he asked his friend Denny Hillis why he appeared sad, why Denny was appearing sad. Hillis replied, because he will die soon. Feynman will die soon. Feynman said that this sometimes bothers him too, but he had told so many stories to so many people which will stay after he is gone. So it doesn't bother him that much. So Feynman was actually never gone. After he died, one letter was found which he had written in 1946 to his wife Arlene, and that was read openly. I think recently it was read openly. Okay, I'll have to check. So there are some excerpts. I find it hard to understand in my mind what it means to love you after you are dead, but I still want to comfort and take care of you, and I want you to love me and care for me. I want to have problems to discuss with you. I want to do little projects with you. I never thought until just now that we can do that. What should we do? We started to learn make clothes together, or learn Chinese, or getting a movie projector. Can't I do something now? No, I am alone without you, and you were the idea woman and general instigator of all our wild adventures. So this was a time when Feynman was actually under depression. So he wrote this letter to Arlene. She was dead. I know you will assure me that I am foolish and that you want me to have full happiness and don't want me to be in that way, in my way. I'll bet you are surprised that I don't even have a girlfriend except you, sweetheart, after 2 years. But you can't help it, darling, nor can I. I don't understand it, for I have met many girls and very nice ones, and I don't want to remain alone. But in 2 or 3 meetings, they all seem ashes. You only are left to me. You are real. My darling wife, I do adore you. I love my wife. My wife is dead. P.S. Please excuse me my not mailing this, but I don't know your new address. Quite sad, right? But I just wanted to share with you after this was explored. So I have collected some famous quotes before we finish. In 1974 at Caltech, Feynman gave a lecture on cargo cult science, which has the semblance of science, but it's only pseudoscience due to a lack of a kind of scientific integrity, a principle of scientific thought that corresponds to a kind of utter honesty on the part of the scientist. This is a common problem even in today's world, and it has, I think, many folds expanded. He instructed the graduating class that the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. So you have to be very careful about that. After you have not fooled yourself, it's easy not to fool other scientists. You just have to be honest in a conventional way after that. The easiest person to fool is yourself. Okay, some more quotes. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. As I get older, I realize being wrong isn't a bad thing like they teach you in school. It's an opportunity to learn something. In fact, this was the quote which I learned when I was in my bachelor's, and this inspired me the most. So all the talks which I gave later on as a scientist, I was never afraid, because I was never afraid to be wrong. I am not even afraid today. As I get older, I realize that being wrong isn't a bad thing. They teach you in school. It's an opportunity. Oh, this we just read. Sorry. Study hard what interests you most in the most undisciplined, irrelevant, and original manner possible. This was Feynman. Students should be made to think, to doubt, to communicate, to question, to learn from their mistakes, and most importantly, have fun in their learning. In fact, recently we come across one meme where there is a cartoon, a student standing against a teacher. The teacher is asking him, question everything, and the student says, why? You have no responsibility to live up to what other people think you ought to accomplish. I have no responsibility to be like they expect me to be. It's their mistake, not my failing. He knew he was a man of substance, so he never cared, he never bothered of what other people thought about him. I'm always looking like a child for the wonders I know I'm going to find, maybe not every time, but every once in a while. Science is what we have learned about how to keep from fooling ourselves. It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is, it doesn't matter how smart you are, if it doesn't agree with the experiment, it's wrong, the way he did it. Right? If you want to master something, teach it. Yeah, this I completely agree with. I just taught electrodynamics for the first time in my life last semester, and now finally I know a bit of electrodynamics. Physics isn't the most important thing, love is. Actually, this is what he wrote to the mother of one of his PhD students. So his PhD student comes to him and tells him that he wants to teach physics to his mother, but she does not want to learn. And Richard says, okay, what can I do for you? He says, can you write to my mother, that which will probably, because it's you, it will probably provoke her interest in physics, in learning physics. He says, okay, I will do that. He writes a letter and he says, do not worry about filling your mind with physics, for the heart filled with love is enough. Physics isn't the most important thing, love is. That's what he writes. Physics is like beep, sure it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it. Okay, so there were these stamps released by the US. Only 4 scientists have appeared on those stamps, and one is Richard Feynman with some Feynman diagrams around. Let's take a look at one of my most favorite videos. How many of you have already seen it? Because if you have seen it, you would know just looking at this. Okay, you have not. None of you have. I am very happy because now we can see it together and enjoy it. The thing is, there was a story which his sister tells, that they had to get breakfast from some people when they were going to their home. Feynman and his partner, maybe it was his partner's home, and they created this song by the time the breakfast is getting ready. Okay, the song is called Orange Juice. I have to. Happy 105th birthday to Professor Feynman. Thank you. So do you want to discuss something or ask from me something? I might be able to answer or might not. Yes. Can you speak a bit louder, please?
He dropped mathematics, then went towards the electrical engineering,
Yes.
then towards the physics. So I just want to know, like, what do you think? What will happen if we choose the mathematics or electrical engineering instead of physics?
So that will depend perfectly on your taste. If you like something to explore, if you want to be completely immersed in something, and if you are happy being immersed into that, it doesn't matter then. You can choose anything what you want.
And another one, he spent major part of his lifetime in Caltech.
Yes.
So do you believe Caltech, like the major, contribution to his success was Caltech?
Oh, actually, he admired his time in Caltech quite a lot. But the real work that he had done about research was mostly in Cornell. And in Cornell, he was actually living with some like-minded people in their house. And in fact, the condition to live in this house was rationality, was to free thinking and so on. So he used to admire that a lot, and this is where he devised many theoretical ideas which were original, such as QED and so on. At Caltech, of course, he contributed so much through teachings and other forms of research and his own other theories. But it's tough to say which one dominated more. In terms of number of years, the answer is Caltech. But we will not know unless we hear it from Feynman himself. Anyone else has any comments or anything which you want to share, which you know about Feynman? Any stories which you must have heard, which you want to share or discuss?
What's your opinion on religion?
I would like to stay silent and would use my rights to stay silent. I like Feynman's opinion. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks to the Science Club.
It was a very insightful talk by Professor Ashish Arora, and thanks to all of you, all the audience who attended, and special thanks to Professor Ashish Arora. And in the end, I would just like to say, like, a very happy 105th birthday, Professor Feynman. Thank you so much.